Welcome to the Dreamboat. Remember, you can join the DRI for just £30 a year. You get access to more content, including videos and discounts for our events. It's a great way of finding out more about our work, joining our dream community, and supporting this podcast. Details in the show notes and at driccpe.org.uk/membership. Welcome to the Dreamboat podcast, a place where we talk about everything dreamy, all you wanted to know about dreams and where you might find some answers. My name is Dave Billington, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also director of the Dream Research Institute. And I'm joined by fellow psychotherapist Laura Payne.
Hello, I'm Laura Payne, and I'm also part of the Dream Research Institute. And we're called the Dreamboat because we are recording our podcast overlooking the beautiful canal barges here at Little Venice in London.
We'll be looking at dreams, talking to guest experts, and answering your questions.
Now, let's get on with the episode.
We're always asked what this or that image might mean in a dream. And if you've listened for a while, you'll be aware that Laura and I don't like to put hard and fast rules on any meanings or interpretations. And getting ready for this episode, I came across this quote in the introduction to Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. The quote is actually John Freeman. He says, "The interpretation of dreams, whether by the analyst or by the dreamer himself, is for the Jungian psychologist an entirely personal and individual business," which I strongly agree with. But it's certainly true that encyclopedias of dream symbols might be useful. It's certainly something that I started out looking at. But in the end, it comes down to the one adage, which is, what does that image or person or place mean for you?
Yes, I like to call it our own private language. And I often use the phrase, which regular listeners will know, that with dreams, what is our psyche knocking on our door at night, trying to tell us, and what is it trying to show or ask us to deal with? And it likes to throw it at you, I think, in many regular symbols that have a private meaning for you, particularly if you get under the bonnet and you look and try and find out what that recurring symbol really does mean for you. And it doesn't mean that you have to go into therapy or work with a dream interpreter in any way. You can, if you take a step back and perhaps have a dream journal and look at these regular recurring images, you might be able to track their deeper meaning for you, what your psyche is trying to say. And I think although we talk about symbols having a private meaning, which they do, there are some symbols that just seem to contain a similar meaning for most people. Jung would call these images archetypes, symbols that transcend personal experience and become a sort of shared image within a global consciousness, making them really powerful forces. So Dave and I thought it would be fun to look at some of our own favourite images that have come up during the podcast, and just generally images that we've noticed when we're doing dream work.
I would refer people back to the episode that we recorded with Dr. Nigel Hamilton in Series 1, where he talks about his perspective on symbols in dreams and some of the important symbols that are useful for dream work as well.
Do you have any favourites? What are your favourites then, Dave? There are ones that we obviously get with the Dream Lab. And what recurring images do you enjoy working with?
Well, just to say, I think this is something really important for working with dreams, whether it's your own or when you're working with other people and they come up in dream work. It's a way of entering into this mysterious little narrative or surreal series of images that a dream has brought up, because there are some definite themes that we can look at between people. So we do this when we're working with the waking dream process, which we use so much in our work. And it's like, so, where are you? What's the landscape? What's the environment? What's the setting? That's one of the first questions that we ask. And so, because there is most often it's not actually universal. Most often there's a place, and and you're in that
Exactly.
place, or something's in that place. And it might be, there's the built environment. So you're in a home, you're in a building, you're in a hotel, you're in a hospital, but there's something, some sort of structure. Or then on the other hand, maybe it's a landscape. And in terms of what really attracts me, I mean, it depends what appears in a given dream. But I always feel like when there's a natural landscape there, the metaphor that I immediately see is, what is this telling you about your nature? What is the landscape of your nature, who you really are? And it's quite different from something that is constructed and built, and maybe relates more to the conditioned mind and the part of ourself that has to conform and be part of society or whatever else it is, those ideas that come from outside. So in terms of landscapes, my own personal experience of that has been, the important ones have often been mountains. And so, getting up high, it is something I like to do. I'm not a climber, but I like to walk in the hills, and I like to walk in mountains. But also I am somebody who likes to get perspective on things. That's part of what led me to this work. So there is something that again, that symbolizes an experience of getting up away from what might be the kind of busy and denser atmosphere of what's down below, and getting up some space where there's the ability to see farther, get a sense of what's around, what's coming. And that's a very comfortable place for me. And it wouldn't be for everyone else necessarily. Do you relate to that at all, Laura?
I do, and particularly mountains. It's always been a sort of a heart's yearning place. I think when I'm dreaming of mountains, it's something very spiritual to sort of when I'm with mountains. And again, I think as Dr. Nigel Hampton I think says in the when talking about movement in dreams, there's that movement of going up. That sort of transcendent. There's an uplifting thing about mountains. So if a mountain is in a dream for me, it's always, I suppose, like a lot of regular images, it's a wake-up call. What am I being asked to sort of get, as you say, an overview on? But it's a coming home, I always find, for me when I'm in mountains. And as you know, Dave, recently I've gone back to doing a lot of sailing. And so I am now in the opposite world, and I am spending an inordinate amount of time both in this world and in the dream world on a boat. And I find that quite, again, how much of it is sort of just general fears and concerns about being on a boat, and how much of it is about, as Dr. Hamilton would say, a watery nature, which I never really thought I had before. And I know we've discussed the use of the elements, and it's something that we use at the place that you and I both trained at. We were interested in elemental psychology. The water element for me was, and whether it equates to feelings or not, I don't really know. It's meant to have a link, but my water nature is now being allowed to find full expression, I could say, both in waking life and dream life.
But I think there's different ways, as with every symbol, there's different ways of looking at water and even ocean as a symbol in itself. Because I have my own relationship to that. I grew up in an area that was full of lakes, but far away from the sea. But occasionally we would have a chance to go out to the coast, which was, a solid day's drive from where we were. And it was the Pacific Ocean there, and it was immensely powerful and such a different environment. It had a big impression on me when I was a child. But there's also, so that's the personal associations. But I think there's a way of looking at water as also kind of relating to the unconscious, the sense of that there's what's above the surface and there's what's below the surface. and the life below can be very different than what's above. I can remember dreams from childhood of going from kind of being above and then looking down below the surface, and being, it's those wonderful dreams where you can breathe underwater, it doesn't matter, and there being kind of another almost a mirror image of the world above down there, a home or I can't remember specifically whether it's a house or a flat or something like that somebody can go into, and the whole thing is happening underwater. And it's like, okay, well, what is the part of me that's below the surface in this way? It's not the same thing as being underground, and it's a different aspect of oneself. And actually, since I'm in the mood for quotes today, apparently there's another quote. This is from Inner Work by Robert Johnson. And again, I just came across this. He says, deep in this unseen ocean of energy, he's talking about the unconscious, deep in this unseen ocean of energy, huge forces are at work. Mythical kingdoms, symbolized by the legends of Atlantis, exist there in the depths and carry on lives parallel to the daily life of our conscious minds.
That is gorgeous. I love it.
Lovely?
Yeah, really.
Great book.
Really
Highly
nice.
recommended for anyone who's interested in this sort of work.
We'll stick it on the show notes. Yeah. You're making me also think about really, it was a weird experience when I then, when it occurred, but I would have a regular dream from childhood of a particular, almost like I used to call it the ice station dream. And sometimes I would be in the Southern Ocean, but everything was frozen. And even there was a boat and there was a particular, almost like a station that then looked out to the frozen waste. And, like you, I spent part of my childhood in Canada, and I often used to wonder whether it was associated with that particular time. And then my sister and I, a few years ago, went back for an anniversary, left the UK and went back to just go and retrace our childhood together. And as I got near a place where we used to live, which was by the St. Lawrence River in Montreal, which would then freeze. It was quite a remarkable thing to see this fast-flowing, massive river then freeze over in the winter. I saw my ice station and I realized that this thing that I kept dreaming about actually did exist, and that it was a real place that had obviously stuck in my childhood memory. But there I was, sort of 60, at the age of 60. I think I was 60. No, I was in my 50s. And I had recalled and actually saw this place. The weird thing is that since I've seen it for real, and I've placed the image that I had regularly recurring in my dream, I've never had the dream again.
Wow.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? I love it.
Yeah.
Here I am, a dream interpreter, saying, oh, it's weird. Because we also think that as well. We don't have the answers for everything. And even we are still surprised by the power of symbols in our dreams.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it reminds me of, I can't remember who. Is it Jung that says that a symbol only exists until its meaning is known, and then once the meaning is understood, it disappears and another symbol takes its place. I think it's actually Dr. Hamilton who says that. Now that I think about it, but I think it really makes sense to me. That a symbol is there; it holds meaning until we know what it is, until we've fully incorporated what that meaning is. And then it disappears. And that doesn't mean having a cognitive understanding of it necessarily. It means about relating to that aspect of ourselves that's wrapped up in that energy. And then once that's that, then it's no longer necessary. But there will be another symbol along to take its place and lead us further. And again, it's that idea of the shared language with the unconscious that we start to develop. It learns how to speak to us. It learns how to catch our attention, and we learn what to pay attention to, and we learn some of what that might mean for us as well.
And also to dialogue back. Sometimes this becomes once we understand the private language or the personal language, and we have a clue of what that symbol actually means for us personally, there's almost like a two-way dialogue with the psyche, and the symbol becomes even more enriched in many ways. Yeah. You left me thinking also about just movement generally in dreams. I'm always when I'm working with people, I love it when they say, "I was in a car, I was in a in a train," and all of those symbols that represent not just movement, but represent, as we've discussed before, the ego traveling through this world. What is if you see us, the body, as a carrier of everything inside, then there's our sense of self and our sense of identity. That's what I mean by ego, obviously. How is it getting through the world? Then the psyche regularly sort of throws up different images that illustrate that. And I had a client, I remember a client, but I think it sticks in my mind because I had very similar dreams where for a long time she was in a sports car. And it was all about the sports car as she raced through life. And then something happened and she had to slow down and the car changed, which I thought was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of images around transport that when they pop up, whether I'm working as an interpreter or for myself, I think, oh yes, I love it when that image comes along.
Yeah, well, you've reminded me of a client who was telling me about a dream in which she'd lost her car, and part of what was coming out of that, the interesting conversation was about a car and driving and drives and your drive and having lost your drive and so there was a real connection there. And I think that's always interesting with a car particularly, which is a vehicle that you might be in control of, but how often do we have these dreams where someone else is driving it, or there's no one in the driver's seat, or it's rolling backwards, or you're in the back seat? And so what does that say about your autonomy, your agency at that moment in your life, and then what kind of vehicle it is also says something about how that's seen from the outside, like the sports car, or compare that to whatever else it might be, horse and buggy.
Yeah.
Do you remember we had a Dream Lab guest? I think it was Yaz Floyer who was talking about taking her family on the train, and we had a discussion about forms of transport there. That here's something that is traveling from place to place, and you're going. It's collective. Not only you're with your family, but it's public. It's controlled by something beyond. There's a driver at the front, but there's a system around it. So it's very much very connected to the social and technological context that you maybe find yourself in, and how that's different from getting in the family car and driving somewhere.
Yeah. It's it's rich with there's symbols that are rich with clues about yourself and your situation in life. How is the ego going to get through this thing called life? What is its transport system? And so I always find that really interesting. But I find that, I don't know what you think about this, Dave, but it's very different from the house and the home, which again, for me, that's not the ego, but that's that sense of self. It's got an identity of some kind, that the house. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. It's like the structure which the psyche is contained in. It's not all of it, but there is this structure. And there's been a couple of lovely things that have come up around the new home, and what's it like to be in a place that you're maybe taking ownership of and decorating it, and what is it like to find yourself in a new place? And I think it ties in with what we would think of as the cycle of death and rebirth. The old self, the old place is left behind, and now here's a new place, and you have to find yourself in it. But also, then there's the revisiting of places from the past. I remember having, for good reason, it was when I was in therapy, and the dreams were about, I find myself at my parents' house. I find myself on my parents' land, again and again.
Yeah.
And because there was something there that I was working through from that time in my life when I'd lived in that particular place. And I know we've had people ask questions about, why am I dreaming about being at my old school or, back in the house I used to live in when I was a child? Well, okay, there's an aspect of yourself that is needing to be addressed and needs some attention right now. And so that's why you're going back there in your dreams.
And some people have, I know this for myself, they have buildings, places, homes that don't represent anything that you've ever lived in the real world, but are almost places of comfort that you go back to within the dream world, and it's almost like a feeling of coming home. I know that we talked about PTS dreams and finding a safe place in a dream, and a safe place when you work with a post-traumatic stress disorder. It's quite critical that when you're working with someone, that you find a safe place that you can go to once you start addressing the trauma. And I think the psyche does this within dreams as well, that there is a place that the psyche has constructed in some way that and when you're there, it. But if you try to capture it or explain it to somebody when you're not dreaming, it just doesn't make sense. But the minute you're back in that place, your psyche is almost like some theatre world that you have created. You're safe there. And it's like the psyche saying, this is almost what you need to feel safe.
Yeah. It's important to have those places. And I think in a general way, then there are types of places we might find ourselves. I referred to this a moment ago, but a hospital, the doctor's office, a clinic, and it's like, okay, well, this is a place for healing. Or depending on where you are with things, it might be a place of relating to what is not well in you as well. But ultimately, it's not about being alone with that. It's like this is a place where people go to deal with their illnesses, their unwellness, if I can use that word. There are other places which are for learning, schools and universities and campuses and things like that. Places of work. And it's like, well, so which part of you is relating to this particular environment, or rather, which part of you is being expressed in this environment? So when you find yourself in a school setting in a dream, is this about revisiting something that happened to you at a certain time in your life, or is this about the part of you that is learning or being taught by something in life as well?
You saying that reminds me of a dream I used to have. A recurring nightmare. It was a nightmare, really, in that I kept redoing my A-levels, which are the exams in the UK that you do when you're sort of 18, basically ready to go on to the next level of education. And at that time, I did my A-levels. It was a complicated time in my life. I didn't do as well as I was predicted to do. And boy, did my psyche just keep replaying that. The number of times at night I just resat those A-levels. And until I went off and went back to redo to do a degree. I had another qualification post A-levels, and I at that time never got to go to university, which is what I had always wanted to do. And once I had done my degree, I never had that dream again. And so something got repaired. I know we've talked about this before, but there was something about that was incomplete, that my psyche knew within me, within this sense of self, was incomplete. So I kept going back to school and kept mucking up those A levels so many times,
Night after night.
night after night. And so yeah, it's interesting how these things keep. And I know I keep saying this, but how the psyche keeps knocking on the door of self with lots of different images to help you deal with something and repair it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's maybe a more Freudian way of looking at that as a wish fulfillment. I wish I could redo this.
Yeah, nice pickup.
I don't think that gets to the heart of it, though, because what I hear in what you just shared is that there's part of you that knows it's possible and knows it's within your reach, and that it's incomplete, and that you're unsatisfied without it. It's not the same thing as a fantasy.
No, I agree.
So it leads you, and it expresses that motivation you have to go back to that, even when it maybe seems like doors are closed in that direction. And I think the proof is in the fact that it disappears. It's not about anxiety. It's not about the not necessarily even about regret. It's about the completion.
Yeah, thank you. I like that as an interpretation. I think that's true. But also, again, how inside the psyche is almost saying, you know what, wake up. You need to deal with this. There is another way. So that when the possibility does possibly present itself in the real world, the psyche's prepped you already to recognize that there is another way forward.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, you touched on this before, but I wondered if we could talk a little bit more about kind of the elements, because it is so core to what we've been trained in. But it's really how I think about things, personality as well as the symbolism. So we talked a little bit about water, and of course there's all the different forms that takes, but certainly oceans and waterfalls and lakes and whatever else it might be, rain as well as part of it. And wrapped up in all of those experiences, what do you feel in any of those circumstances? Being soaked in a rainstorm on a cold night is a very different experience from bathing in tropical waters under a blue sky. And it might bring out a different feeling in your body, but in your whole mind, body, feeling experience. But fire is always an interesting one, I think, and there's the images that I think of from my own experience around fire have actually been kind of earth and fire, which is that kind of volcanic energy, and being able to relate to that as something, as ever with a dream, once you get beyond the fear of something that's very powerful, then you recognize that actually it's something in your own psyche that you're cut off from, that's your own power. And because you're afraid of it, it seems overwhelming and it seems like it's going to be a destructive force. But actually, when you connect to it, it is your own energy, and it is something about the motivation and something that's coming up from the depths. And I would think of it in those really transpersonal terms, something that comes from far beyond you, in this case, far below you, and comes up to the surface. And it's a renewal. This is how the surface of the earth was made, was through volcanic energy, and it's still happening in some parts of the world. Yeah. And it's that beautiful, the fertility that comes with that, the fecundity. It makes me think of landscapes like Hawaii or places like that. It's there's so much life force that is connected to an image like that.
You've got me thinking now. Controversial proposition here. I wonder if the element that we face the most in dreams is the one that we need to pay attention to. So that if you are, say, naturally a fire person, whatever that means. So if for people who haven't worked in this way, fire is about, I suppose, getting on with things, making decisions, being quite out there in the world. And I'm doing this, and you can't see this, but I'm doing my choppy hand, which is very much a fire sign type of gesture here, getting out there in the world. You can hear it in my voice. And so I am a fire type. I know I'm a fire type. Naturally, I would say to people, if you want, come and stand in the fire with me. It's lovely. People look at you really weird. But I don't dream a lot of fire. I don't dream much about fire. And I wonder if that's because the fire element is quite balanced within me.
Right.
And I'm just wondering whether we dream, or the elements that we might dream of regularly are the ones that need to be more balanced within. I don't know.
Well, I can certainly see that when I look back at dreams I remember from childhood, adolescence, maybe more particularly, and I dreamt about water a lot, and certainly, young man, 80s, rural Canada, feelings were not really being encouraged that much, and nobody was too interested in them, least of all me. So I think there was something about that. It's like, hey, there's this whole other part of yourself that you could be relating to, and I think through that it did lead me to relating to it as well. But yeah, the fire is I think an important thing of where I would think of myself as being more oriented towards the earth element. Very good at kind of plodding along in a way, but that what that needs is it needs to be enlivened, and it needs to have some of that fire and energy coming up. I would think of it as inspiration, motivation, all those things that connect you to life force and give you reasons to move forward and change and get out of the rut, stop from being stuck. Being stuck is a real risk of that earth part of our nature.
Yeah, getting sort of soggy or just getting bogged down in things. I mean, our language often expresses our relationship with elements. We're often revealing quite a lot of where we are by some of the language we choose around describing where we are within ourselves, within our. I'm going to use the word psyche again because this is our relationship with a part of ourself that is quite mysterious.
Yeah. And interesting, actually, the examples you gave there were about being bogged down or something being, what did you say, marshy?
Yeah, soggy.
Soggy. That's what it is. Yeah. So it's like this is the water and earth together, and again, if it's not enlivened, that becomes very heavy, and you get that kind of the Eeyore feeling that character, but there's something quite depressive about being way down and stuck in mud and unable to move forward, and
that's when you need a bit of fire to dry it all up a little bit.
Yeah. And then there's the air element, which again, perspective, getting above things, and the joy of if you ever have flying dreams, that's it's lovely to be able to play in that element as well. But where I see it quite often with people working with dreams, and maybe it's the kind of people who really spend their time working with dreams, it's often about the descent from the air, actually.
Yeah,
that it's lovely to be in air, which symbolizes thought and spirit, and freedom and inspiration. Not tied down to anything, not limited by anything, but also not really having form either. And then often the image that comes up is like a plane crash, actually.
Yes.
It's something that you might relate to in waking life, but really the impact of that, the impact of it is about what happens when that part of your nature, or if that is your nature, what happens when you confront the material world, the material reality, and it feels like coming with a sudden thump down to ground.
Yeah, we use the expression, don't we, coming down to earth with a bump when we're
Yes,
forced
exactly.
into reality.
Yeah, and so many times I think that particular experience is symbolized by that image in dreams.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly, all puns intended, gone around the houses a bit with some of our favourite symbols. I mean, there are so many more. I think we perhaps should come back to this another time, because we haven't even touched on things like alchemy yet, which is another rich world of symbolism that often surfaces. The imagery of alchemy surfaces in our dreams. And perhaps I know we've done an episode of that with Dr. Hamilton, and I think in the second series. So it's interesting, and in the end, this is what dreams are about: what comes up.
Yeah, symbols and symbolism. It's a literally unending subject, literally unlimited, because there's the subjective part. So every person has their own relationship to an image, and the force that it has for them, the feeling, the connection, the association, whatever else it might be. But then also on a cultural level, there's symbols that they get are shared and passed around. And then beyond that, as you said, then there's an archetype level in which there are symbols that are aspects of consciousness in that Jungian view. But I'm sitting here with the book on my desk, which is the Taschen Book of Symbols, and it's about a foot thick of different things from around the world. It's not even a psychological book; it's just images in categories. So an absolutely wonderful book to look at. But I mean, you could spend a year going through that, or 2 years, 5 years. I don't know. It's absolutely massive, all those things. So it's an endless subject, and well worth delving into and developing your own relationship to that language of symbols.
Nice. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on symbols and some of your own relationships, or your own relationship with some of the symbols, particularly the elemental imagery that comes up. Something to come back to, definitely.
Yes. Anyway. Thank you for sharing all of that as well, and for sharing some really meaningful dreams as well. It's always fun to talk about these things.
It is, anyway. So whatever your symbols are, sweet dreams.
And keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.
So thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Don't forget to like us and leave comments on your favourite podcast platform. As I'm sure you know, that's the way we build an audience for the Dreamboat podcast, and also to spread news about dreaming. And as we said, there are many ways you can share your dreams at the DRI, the Dream Research Institute.
Yes, we have courses, events, and workshops, and we want to hear from you. So check out the show notes for links, or find us on Instagram and on our Facebook page and on our website at driccpe.org.uk. And if you want to explore your dreams further, or you would like to support us, you can join the DRI as a member for just £30 a year. As a member, you will get discounts for all of our events and short courses. You'll get our newsletter with latest dream research news, and we'll also be adding other special member benefits during the year. Of course, members' dreams will always be given preference for reading on the podcast Dream of the Week slot. So go to the link on the show notes and become a DRI member today. Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.